The Room Between Us is about the bodily experience of aphasia through the eyes of a carer. My mother experienced the speech disability aphasia, which is caused by damage to the speech centres of the brain. And during that period when I was looking after her, I couldn't reckon with silence and the lack of communication. And I tried to articulate that and capture that in my poetry. And that's what this collection is about. It is how we can communicate in different ways and the bodily experience, and how that experience can be held within other parts of the body. There weren't any other texts actually about the female experience encountering aphasia, and I wanted to express that in the book. And the book itself refers to and responds to the linguistic theory of Roman Jacobson and his idea about aphasic disturbances. And that was one of the characteristics my mother had, where she sometimes would say one word instead of the other. So within the collection itself, there are repetitions of words. There is that reckoning with silence and this appeasement with it also. I think in terms of language, I had to be really careful. I was aware that I wanted my mum's voice to shine through and not have my voice take over her voice or her expression. So I had to think about form. I had to think about using the poetry form to create that distance from myself and my mother so that her voice could shine through. So within the collection itself, there are long lines and short lines. There are some words that are repeated, and that's just to emphasise the whole communication experience and what aphasia is like. My language, it changed. The way in which I spoke and communicated with my mother changed. We didn't just use words, we used gestures, we used pictures, images. So my vocabulary just became quite sparse, and that's reflected in the poems themselves. There were times where I couldn't even articulate what my thoughts were. And that was because I had reduced my language to that of the body through pointing and through facial gestures. So for me to hone down that vocabulary, to hone down the language, was quite not so challenging, because that's the way I spoke to my mother. I feel quite humbled to be shortlisted, and I feel grateful to have that space in which the carer's narrative can actually unfold, because the carer's narrative tends to be quite quiet, in the cupboard, in a room, within a house, and it's not something that we talk about. It's something that we share with the person we care for. So it's really, to me, quite exciting to have this space in which to promote the carer's responsibilities and to talk about what it is to be a carer.